if you do not know how to create this properly. I'm not talking maintenance. You don't really have to maintain the gravel bed. If you do have to maintain it, then you're doing it wrong. If you have to send it gravel back in there every few weeks and suck up all the dirt and there's a ton of poop that's getting built up, something else is going on in this tank that you are not addressing. But if you are feeding on a moderate amount, it's not overstocked, and it is set up properly with a proper filtration system, then you should not have to do any gravel whacking at all. And that's basically the bottom line of the video. How much work is it to maintain a sand bed? These sand beds, how much time do I spend on keeping them the way they look? If I tell you that I spend 0 time maintaining my sand beds, would you believe me? Well, this video is about that exact topic and how much work exactly it is to keep my sand beds the way they stay looking, and how often I actually change them out, which is never. I actually take sand out of my tanks because it's a replenishing resource in my tanks, because there are snails that die eventually or get eaten, and then the shells break down and then they become sand. There's such a huge snail population that I actually have to take about 5-6 handfuls of sand every few months out of each tank. Otherwise the sand bed starts becoming thicker and thicker and thicker, and yeah, I don't ever change them out. I just take a little bit out every few months. And if you do have questions, highly recommend commenting below. This is actually a viewer question from earlier today, as well as subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification icon so you do find out if I do actually answer your question on a video format or through just messaging underneath the question. But I believe that this was really important, so I decided to make a separate video about it. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys watch till the end. Let's go through this journey.
Produced by Mali.
I'm actually in the middle of water changes. I'm always in the middle of water changes. So you see all the buckets there. But essentially, this video is going to cover the foundation of a successful aquarium. Not just for plecos, but for all types of fish. And I think this cannot be stressed enough. Your gravel bed or your sand bed, or healthy gravel or sand bed, is a very good foundation for a successful aquarium. I believe it's as equally important as the filter for your nitrifying bacteria and stuff like that, as long as you set it up properly and it's maintained properly. And when I mean maintain, I don't do any work to any of these sand beds. I don't change them out. I don't take any of the sand, and I don't really replace new sand. Every few months I do take a few handfuls of sand from every tank when I do set up a new tank or something and I need sand, because these sand beds do get replenished on its own, because I do have a large snail population, and when they die or get eaten by the plecos and the shells get broken down, it ends up becoming sand, and it also helps to buffer my water. Okay, but in terms of just your tank, if it's not even for plecos, if you are keeping a fish tank, you should have a gravel bed in your fish tank for stability. Now, if the gravel bed is above 2 inches, then you are going to run into issues like nitrogen pockets, which a lot of people don't know how to deal with. So I would recommend learning about that before you go into gravel beds that are over 2 inches. All my sand beds here are under 2 inches, and that's only because I am not advanced enough like Father Fish is to keep a 4-inch sand bed. But realistically, if you are going to keep an aquarium, and a lot of these aquariums that are in Canada are designed for this particular purpose, is to have a large gravel and sand bed, which is about 3 to 4 inches, which gives you a large area where underneath on the bottom there's denitrifying bacteria that break down nitrates, so your tank becomes so much more stable. Now, this can be achieved with an under gravel filter setup. I do have a video about my own under gravel filter tanks. I have 2 tanks, actually no, more than 2 tanks. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tanks with under gravel. Well, actually 7 technically. Well, yes, actually, yeah, no, they're all. I'll put some B-roll of some of the tanks. I have 7 tanks with under gravel filters, and I rarely do water changes, if any, on any of these tanks because the nitrates don't build up. It's heavily planted. There's a huge plate. There's a lot of oxygen flowing through the plate, and it still has areas where there's dead pockets, but it's not dead to the point where there's no life. There's still snails and stuff living in my gravel bed. There's a lot of Malaysian trumpet snails that live in my sand beds and gravel beds, and I think that's a huge part of it. Like, you need to have a healthy substrate. So to achieve this healthy substrate, I would say you need to pick a type of substrate. Like, for example, if you're gonna keep plecos, you pick something like sand or smooth rock, small rock, you know, mixed with sand. I would say ideally sand is better with the structures on top of it, you know, like safe amounts. So like a 1 to 2 inch sand bed and something like that. But if you are gonna go and set up a planted tank, then you can have a larger 3-4 inch gravel bed with heavy root pre-feeding plants as well as Malaysian trumpet snails. But to have a healthy substrate bed, you need to have something like Malaysian trumpet snails that dig in through the sand and always clear out the debris and eat any excess organics and converts into breakable waste. The trumpet snails really maintain it to such a degree where, if you can see my sand beds, you might imagine that I actually sit here and siphon these tanks every single day. I actually am trying to test on this tank back here, which has nitrate resins from API, and I haven't done a water change in about a month, probably a little longer now. Yeah, it's actually more than a month. So all of February plus a few weeks of January. And I'm only going to do a water change because I need to take some water out of it to do a larger water change in another tank. So you can see the sand bed. I'll put some close-ups at this point so you can see it. These tanks, I don't actually have to do any maintenance to maintain the gravel bed to the way it is. I don't siphon it. I don't do anything like that. It naturally maintains that because the Malaysian trumpet snails basically eat all the organic debris out of the sand bed. It's a heavy population, and I don't overfeed my tanks. I feed like once or twice a day, like small amounts to my fish, and they're completely well fed, and then snails get a small amount of food after that, the leftovers and stuff, and they are voracious. So when I do feed, the snails do come out and fight for the food and stuff, and then the fish also, you know, eat some of the snails, which is really cool to watch. I actually enjoy it. It's a natural system. I believe that this is what creates stability, and one of the main things I want to add here is that these systems are so stable that if I were to take a 5-gallon tank and set up a brand new tank right now in a next setup, all I have to do is take a few handfuls of sand from a couple of these tanks, throw it in there with some snails and all, and set up a little filter and my tank, and take water from a tank, one of these tanks, and fill it up so it's like aged tank water, and I can put fish in there. I can put any of my sensitive fish in there as long as the temperature is good and whatever, and the filter will establish itself within a couple of days. It wouldn't be a problem because the sand bed carries so much beneficial bacteria. Each sand grain has so much surface, so like that's the really big plus to this entire thing. But the downside to having a gravel bed is that if you do not know how to create this properly, I'm not talking maintenance. You don't really have to maintain the gravel bed. If you do have to maintain it, then you're doing it wrong. If you have to send it a gravel back in there every few weeks and suck up all the dirt, and there's a ton of poop that's getting built up, something else is going on in this tank that you are not addressing. But if you are feeding on a moderate amount, it's not overstocked, and it is set up properly with a proper filtration system, then you should not have to do any gravel whacking at all. And that's basically the bottom line of the video. Establish a proper gravel or sand bed for your aquarium for long-term success. If you are going to keep animals, a lot of these animals live a very long life, so we have to really consider a stable and healthy environment long term, that you can continuously maintain, and it's not a burden on your schedule and stuff if you are especially keeping several tanks and whatnot. Now, to achieve that, a big part of it is having a proper established filter, and another big part of it is having an established gravel or sand bed. And this is something I think a lot of people forget to mention in the hobby and completely overlook, and they look at the sand as an ornament, and I think that's a misconception, and that's why I made the video. And I hope it helps some of you guys think about this in a more different light, and I'll see you guys on the next video. God bless you all.
Produced by Malik.